Hey everybody, it's Holly here and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be diving into a hot off the press research study that's already making waves amongst online fitness enthusiasts. So this study looks at one of the most debated questions in resistance training, which is, do you really need to train to failure to grow muscle, or can you stop a couple of reps short and still see good results? However, this study takes on a unique approach. Specifically, the authors of this paper are not only interested in the importance of training to failure, they're also interested in this concept while also performing at very low training volumes. Now, this study comes from a well-known research lab that's been generating quite a bit of buzz lately, some positive and some critical. So in today's breakdown, I will walk you through their latest findings, put them into context within the broader body of research, and share some practical takeaways that you can apply to your own training. So let's dive in. So as you all know, resistance training is one of the most effective ways to build muscle, increase strength, and improve your overall health. However, a major barrier for many people is time, and that one speaks to me. Traditional strength training programs often call for multiple sets of multiple exercises with every session, and often these last for well over an hour. But recent research suggests that shorter, more time-efficient routines might still deliver meaningful results if done correctly. Now, this work was popularized by publications titled Practice the Test by Maddox and colleagues in 2017 and subsequent work from the same lab group in 2019 led by Dankel and colleagues. However, much of this research focused on strength outcomes as opposed to muscle growth, which arguably many of us, myself included, are more interested in. Since then, other work has begun to focus on the possibility of gaining muscle size on minimally dosed programs, which you might have heard folks on social media refer to as the minimum effective dose. At the same time, another hotly debated topic that's come to rise in the fitness world is whether or not you need to train to failure, the point where you literally can't complete another rep to get the best results. Now, some argue that going to failure is essential, especially if you're doing fewer sets, while others believe that stopping just short of failure can be just as effective. Now, the study that I'm reviewing today, titled Without Failure, Muscular Adaptations in Single Set Resistance Training Performed to Failure or with Repetitions in Reserve, examines the importance of training to failure in the context of very low training volumes. The researchers set out to investigate whether training to failure in a single set routine would lead to greater muscle size and strength gains compared to stopping just 2 reps shy of failure, which many of you know as repetitions in reserve or RIR. Now, their hypothesis was that training to failure would outperform stopping 2 reps shy of failure, particularly because a single set program doesn't accumulate as much fatigue as multi-set routines. So the idea was to test if failure training has a unique advantage when the total training volume is very low. So let's take a look at the methods. What did they do? Well, to explore that question, the team recruited 50 resistance-trained men and women. Participants were randomly split into 2 groups. One group trained to failure on every set, called the fail group, and then one that stopped 2 reps shy to failure, and they were called the 2RIR group. Everyone followed the exact same workout plan, which was a single set of 9 different exercises covering all muscle groups performed twice per week for 8 weeks. The exercises included in the workout are described on the table that you can see on the screen, with each session lasting about 30 minutes in total. Before and after the intervention, researchers measured the participants' muscle thickness using ultrasound and strength using a 1-rep max test for both the squat and the bench press. They also tested vertical jump height as a proxy for power, and they also evaluated muscular endurance through a high rep leg extension. The final measurement that they were interested in was how accurately participants could estimate their repetitions in reserve, which is something that's extremely important if you're going to use this method effectively in a real life gym setting. So let's take a look at the results. What did they find? Well, out of the 50 participants recruited, 42 completed the study. Both groups made solid progress across the board, but the results did reveal a few subtle differences. In terms of muscle growth, both groups saw measurable increases in muscle thickness, especially in the legs. Failure group did show slightly more growth in areas like the triceps and the mid-quads, but the differences were small and not statistically different. Now, what was perhaps more striking to me is the magnitude of muscle growth observed from such low training volumes. The mid-quad site for the failure group, for example, observed muscle growth in the magnitude of around 0.37 centimeters. Now that's a lot of growth. So to put this in perspective, Thallingham and colleagues observed increases of only 0.11 centimeters in response to 24 weekly sets over a similar period of time. Similar to this, Orbe and colleagues observed muscle growth of only 0.15 centimeters in response to 8 weeks of resistance training. And the table you can see on the screen shows the muscle growth responses and the weekly sets for these comparable studies, along with the present study at the bottom. Now, I don't know about you, but this is really frustrating and confusing to see how participants performing just a quarter of the volume from one lab with only 6 weekly sets can produce 2.5 to 3 times the amount of muscle growth when compared to other studies from other labs performing 24 weekly sets. Participants in this study only performed between 2 to 4 weekly sets on the arms and around 6 sets per week for the quads, yet they saw muscle growth that exceeded what's typically reported in trained populations exposed to far higher training volume. For example, in our recent review, which focused on training volume in the context of muscle growth, the average increase in quad thickness over 8 to 12 weeks tends to fall somewhere between 0.1 and 0.25 of a centimeter. But in this study, the failure group saw 0.37 centimeter increases in the mid-quadricep thickness, right at that 50% venous site. Now, I'm not making any accusations here, but simply pointing out that this data is really impressive, and I think we should probably talk about it. In fact, I've been tracking my own muscle thickness data since 2017, and while I've observed similar quadricep growth to what was reported in this 8-week study, those changes occurred over a much longer time frame, spanning the course of 3 years, to be exact. So these comparisons raise some big questions. Do some labs employ such drastically different techniques that results are no longer comparable between studies? Do we need to include more control groups in research to better understand our measurement error? Are researchers just not that good at measuring muscle growth? And is it impossible to establish a clear set of expectations for muscle growth? Regardless of the answers, we need to be careful not to overinterpret isolated study findings, even when they come from well-respected researchers. It's about placing the data within the broader landscape of what we already know and continue to ask the right questions. Unfortunately, I've seen this recent study result in social media content creators making bold claims that trained individuals can make gains on very low volumes. But me personally, I'm just not sure that I believe this. For example, a study by Baxter and colleagues used a similar protocol consisting of 2 sets twice a week, but specifically for muscle growth maintenance protocols in trained individuals. And guess what? They didn't observe growth from this protocol. And we should also talk about this. One lab's study resulted in robust muscle growth, while another lab using very similar low-volume protocols observed no growth at all. So at the very least, we should not act like either of these findings are gospel. So for me personally, I do not think that my lower body, be it my quads, my glutes, my hamstrings, would continue to grow meaningfully in response to only 6 weekly sets taken to or near failure. But alas, let's turn our attention to the strength outcomes in this paper by Herman and colleagues. Strength gains in the bench press and squat were nearly identical between groups, with both groups showing meaningful improvements over the 8-week period. When it came to muscle power, measured by vertical jump height, the failure group improved more, but the evidence wasn't strong enough to say for certain that the training to failure was the reason. Similarly, both groups improved in muscular endurance, with the failure group again showing slightly better numbers, but not enough to draw firm conclusions. What was especially interesting though is how well participants were able to estimate their repetitions in reserve. Even those who had never used the method before were surprisingly accurate, coming within 2 reps for both the bench press and the squat. And their estimation skills improved over the course of the study, especially for the bench press. Now, this suggests that with just a bit of practice, repetitions in reserve can be a reliable tool for self-regulated training. And if you aren't using an intensity scale when you train, then you should be. So what do these results mean for you and I? Well, here's where it gets practical. If you're somebody with a busy schedule, this study might be good news. It shows that you can possibly get meaningful muscle growth and strength gains with just one well-rounded set of exercise, provided that you bring on that intensity. And perhaps even more importantly, you don't have to train to failure every single time. Stopping even a couple of reps shy can still give you nearly the same benefits, especially when training at moderate loads. Now, I am not sure that this study in isolation has sold me on muscle growth in response to a single set. So for me, I would definitely like to see this study replicated before I start making bold claims suggesting that you can achieve meaningful muscle growth from as few as 4 to 6 weekly sets of exercise. But I'm curious, what do you guys think? Now that I've shared these findings in the context of the broader research, are you compelled by these findings? Or like me, would you also like to see it replicated? It's interesting how science communicators on social media will claim one week that there's no upper limit to training volume, suggesting that you can keep increasing volume exponentially and still see continual gains in muscle growth. Yet the very next week, those same people are telling you that you can achieve 0.37 centimeters of growth from as few as 6 weekly sets. This message is honestly quite contradictory and it just doesn't make sense. So, what are my main takeaways from this study? Well, in summary, the study has some interesting data that suggests that low volume training may lead to meaningful muscle growth, especially if you're training with a high degree of effort and proper form. Whether you push to failure or stop 2 reps shy, both strategies help to build muscle and strength equally. And perhaps more importantly, the findings support a more flexible, sustainable approach to fitness, one that actually might help more people stick with it long term. You don't have to destroy yourself every time you step in the gym to achieve good results. So if you're short on time, according to this research, apparently you don't need to stress. A single set done right is better than no sets at all. And it might be all you need to keep making progress. But please keep in mind that the muscle growth data is very impressive and may need replication before assuming robust gains can be accomplished with such little training volume, particularly when interpreting this data in the context of the broader research. So, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. And if you're looking for a structured, science-based way to apply these principles in your own training, make sure you check out my website to inquire about my evidence-based training programs, which are designed to help you train smart and build muscle. And as always, if you found this breakdown helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel for more no-nonsense training and nutrition science, and let me know in the comments, are you buying this muscle growth data? Let me know down below.